Hello, listeners. This is Saurabh Kale, and you are listening to the CHRO Mindset podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the CHRO Mindset podcast, where we bring you candid, thought provoking conversations with top HR leaders and experts. And here's your host, Pulkit Joshi. Today, we have the privilege of hosting Saurabh Kale. Saurabh is an HR thought leader with over 15 years of experience in talent management and organizational development. Setting up and scaling HR functions and people initiatives for CXOs worldwide has been his area of expertise. His career has taken him to fascinating corners of the globe, from the US, Latin America to the Middle East, India, and Asia Pacific, where he had the privilege to work with some of the world's most renowned companies like Sintel, Wipro, McAfee, Intel, Practo, Grab, and Zeta. Reframing conventional thinking is one of his strengths as a coach consultant. He has built a reputation for innovative HR practices, technology enabled people solutions, and scaling people initiatives with project management skills. He currently heads Talent's 500 people and culture team responsible for employee onboarding, performance management, employee engagement, and HR operations. Saurabh, thanks for taking out time to speak with us today, and welcome to the CHRO Mindset podcast.
Thank you so much, Pulkit, for having me. I am equally excited and looking forward for this conversation.
Great. So, Saurabh, to set the stage for our discussion, let's kick things off by asking a light-hearted question related to HR as a domain. So, I'll go first with if you had taken, if you could take an HR sabbatical anywhere in the world, where would you go and why?
All right. I grew up in Bombay, closer to the shore, but I think I've always been a mountain person. So for me, if I have to take an HR sabbatical or an HR taking a sabbatical, I would prefer to go to Ladakh, biking around, volunteering for local NGOs. I have a personal cause to set up schools, school libraries, internet in the remotest part of the world. So personally, I think, I get inspired by doing things which is not work related and then bring that inspiration back at work. So my sabbatical is going to be mostly volunteering around in the mountains.
That's quite a destination, Saurabh. Love that response. Moving from personal reflections to a more imaginative scenario, let's explore your dream HR team. So if you could have a dream HR team consisting of fictional characters, who would be on it and why?
That's an interesting question. And I'm an 80s kid. I grew up, reading comic strips and comic books. So most of my fictional characters would mostly come from them. So the first one that comes to my mind would be Dexter. I love the way he, conducts his experiments in the labs. He's very intellectual. So my first team member would be Dexter. My second team member is somebody who is probably non-existent, but we have all read about him. It's Hobbes from Calvin and Hobbes. I like the fact that, he brings clarity to the thought process and at the same point in time keeps the conscience clear of people. The next one is, I think I grew up on Iron Man. Love Jarvis, love the way he kind of, builds things from the scrap. So I would love to have somebody like Iron Man who's, interested, passionate about building ground up things. The next one that comes to my mind is somebody who's a natural leader. I love the way Captain America comics came up, during the early times, and now it's into a movie and all. But something that is somebody who's grounded, vulnerable, yet a natural leader. So I would love to have even Captain America on my team. And the last but not least, that one who comes to my mind is Flash, because we all need somebody in the team who gets the job done quickly. So yes, Dexter, Hobbes, Iron Man, not Superman, Captain America, and Flash. This would be my dream team to kind of build as well as lead.
Great. Clearly, you are an Avengers fan, Saurabh. I was hoping that you'll bring in Hulk as well. but great choice of characters there. Thank you. So moving on from the realm of imagination to reality of professional resilience. Let's shift our focus now. Now that we have assembled your dream HR team with fictional characters, I am curious to know about your personal approach. So, talk to us. How do you stay resilient and maintain a positive mindset in the face of challenges and setbacks that you may have faced in your HR career?
Sure. And just to set the context and a disclaimer, resilience is not something like in the movie Matrix, you have a blue pill and you get into the matrix, right? So it's something that gets built over a period of time. So personally, I think I've had tons of failures, more failures than successes. I've also been on the other side where you put in a lot of effort and things haven't worked out. But every time that has kind of happened to me, I've kind of reflected a lot on certain questions. So my personal favorite questions are, why did it happen? It kind of gets you into understanding the root cause analysis, way of thinking. Next, that I ask myself a lot of times is, what did I learn from this? I read it somewhere long time ago that if you wish to build a growth mindset, it's important to focus on learnings as opposed to why did it happen. So yes, why is important from identification, but what did I learn from this whole experience or episode? Next, I over a period of time, I've also learned that let's stay forward looking or a future oriented as well. So my next question is, what am I going to do about it? So it kind of keeps me solution focused as opposed to past focused. So these are three questions, that I would love to summarize into something which is not again my concept, but I read it long time ago, into just three things: what, so what, and now what. What is all about situation. So what is about implication. Now what is about solution. So I think, what has kept me resilient despite all the changing times, scenarios, the talent marketplace has changed, HR or human resources as a field has changed, the setbacks, the successes, everything, I think is just all about, boils down to these three things. So once again, quickly, it's all about what, so what, and now what.
Wow, I'm very fascinated by this three-layered approach. I will try and apply this to my daily workings as well. Thank you for that, Saurabh. So let's move forward, right? As we explore the strategies for maintaining resilience in the HR landscape. Now let's talk about intentional development of skills, right? So reflecting on your journey, please walk us through what is one skill or competency that you intentionally developed to enhance your effectiveness as an HR leader?
I think through this entire career journey, I've probably been blessed to have great mentors and leaders, some really good ones, some not so good ones. So I think learning came in from both the sides, of if I were to lead a team tomorrow or an organization tomorrow, what all should I be doing and should not be doing. So I think one key competency that I continuously focused on is all about seeking continuous feedback, and based on that feedback, learning a new skill probably every year. So my favorite questions, once again, by now you've figured it out, I love asking questions for more clarity. So my favorite questions that I tend to ask my mentors, my teams, my peers is, what's working, what's not working, and what could I do more of or less of. I think based on these three responses, I tend to do a lot more self-reflection, awareness building, and then pick up the skill. For me, I have to pick up one new skill to focus on every year, something that I have made it more like a ritual for myself. So based on these inputs, I would go and invest my time and effort into picking up whatever is the skill that is coming up.
Great thoughts there, Saurabh. Let's shift gears a bit. We are all about adaptability in the HR world, right? And scalability is the name of the game. So I'm curious to know more about your playbook here, and I'm referring to Agile HR as the domain. So what strategies do you employ to ensure that Agile HR practices are scalable and sustainable as the organization grows?
So let's understand Agile for a bit. the word itself says flexibility. So whatever that we build, whether it's people practices, policies, or for that matter, even initiatives in an organization, they need to have certain parameters to be agile. So I have four matrices that I can probably talk about. I'm sure every leader would have his or her way of looking at it. So for me, anything that we develop, in the organization needs to be simple, needs to be scalable, needs to be repeatable, and needs to be implementable. Let's kind of quickly go through it. Simplicity is, for me, if I were to look at any process per se, I generally have this 2-point approach, which means it should not cross beyond 2 touch points. If it's a policy and somebody is scrolling through the mobile or probably on a laptop, generally the direction that I have is it should not be beyond 2 scrolls. Next, let's talk about scalability. If I'm looking at this being deployed in India, can it be scaled to my global hubs? Now that's all about scalability. It could also mean if this policy will hold good, say for 200 employees, will it hold good for when the organization becomes 500 employees? So that's all about scalability. Repeatable is, can I copy paste if I were to kind of, put it simply? So again, if it's about process or a policy or an initiative, can I just take it as is and copy paste it in another geography? And if it works, then it's going to hold the test of time as well. And finally, a lot of folks tend to get caught up in an academic approach as opposed to a practical approach. So for me, implementation or implementability is extremely important at this point in time. So whether it's I would call it as 3 Ps, whether it is policies, processes, products, tools, anything needs to meet these 4 criteria of simplicity, scalability, repetition, and implementability.
Great perspective there, Saurabh. Now let's dive into the real world impact of agile HR practices. And I'm sure listeners would love to hear a story from the trenches. So walk us through a specific instance where agile HR has enabled your organization to respond to changing customer needs or demands.
Fair. And I think that's a very practical question as such, to say that, okay, philosophies and structures help, but how do we go about implementing it on the ground? So I would like to kind of go back in time during the COVID, and we realized it. Personally, I'll talk from the place where I come from, Talent 500, and we started out in year 2021. We ourselves were a young startup, and just in a month later, the Delta variant and a lot of unfavorable situation around us, and a lot of our employees were requiring financial support as a primary caregiver to their family. And we realized this, that that we ourselves are trying to be frugal as a startup, and we also have this need at this point in time. Now, as an HR leader, I think it's extremely important, how do you balance both the sides? So we quickly came up with a salary advance kind of a thing based on what we were hearing from the employees. I like to call this policy as a 2 into 3. 2 months of salary advance to be paid in 3 monthly equated installments at a 0% interest. Now, I know this looks at as probably a very simple, and most of the companies would have implemented on the similar lines. But the speed at which this was implemented and made available to people is probably a differentiator at this point in time. Now, over a period of time, we have taken this to the next level. We realize that people do go through, situations and celebrations in their life wherein money is needed here and now. So we have tied up today with certain partners who make the early wage access available to us, salary advances available to us, micro loans available to us. So I think the need was about financial flexibility and support. And from making a policy quickly and implementing it to probably now, giving them an app at their fingertips is the whole journey. I would call it from an agile practice point of view. One more example I would like to quickly talk about is about insurances. Most of the organizations will give insurance to their employees. The challenge is that there are certain employees who have aging parents or younger kids, and who require hospitalization or a higher coverage. Now, most of the insurance companies have a policy which says minimum 20% participation is required from the organization to extend a, I would say, top up. So we realize that this is a problem because everyone is in different phase of their life. Not everyone would have this situation. We also have young single employees, and we also have seasoned employees who have this situation of family, young kids, and this. So 20% participation is extremely difficult to meet up. So here's what we did. We tied up with a retail insurance company, which basically gives additional 30 lakhs over and above our base coverage and takes it to the next level. So now today we have the insurance as well as we have solved for the problem. So the way I see agile practices or people practices is understanding the problem on the ground and quickly finding the solution to make sure that your employees' experience with you is superlative.
Great, Saurabh. Thank you for sharing those thoughts. So before we pivot into the next dimension of our CHRO conversation, I'm captivated by the real world impact of agile HR that you just shared. So now let's extend our gaze, from a broader lens of HR evolution. So building on your insights, how has the concept of employee experience evolved, and how might it continue to evolve as we integrate design thinking principles into HR strategies?
Sure. So I think engagement would be a good start point to talk about it. 25 years ago, HR primarily focused on annual sports events, celebrations, competitions, and to a very large extent, unfortunately, infamously, Rangoli competitions as well. And probably that became more like a employee engagement approach. And unfortunately, the way I see it, it was a very event-based approach. Today, if you look at employee experience, it talks about a very holistic approach where engagement is a subset of it. So it's no more only an event part of it, but it's about right from the onboarding to the exit, and in a few cases, even as an alumni base. How do we manage the entire employee experience? Now, it could be through, once again, 3 Ps. One is the people part of it. Second is the process part of it. Third is the policies part of it, the tools that we tend to use, and so on and so forth. So the way I see it is the holistic experience using the policies, processes, products, and employees as users using it right from the pre-joining when the offer is rolled out to the time when they separate from the organization and continue to be your brand ambassadors as well. So that is the major difference of HR being just doing one or two things under employee engagement to now focusing on the holistic employee experience right from the hiring to the exit and even beyond.
Great, Saurabh. Now that we have glimpsed into this fascinating evolution of employee experience, let's double down on the mechanics of it. So how do you bring these concepts to life? Specifically, I'm eager to explore how design thinking principles seamlessly weave into the fabric of your HR strategies. And this brings me to this question. How do you infuse design thinking principles into the ideation and execution phases of your HR strategies so that you're able to create a more human-centric approach?
So, Pulkit, in all honesty, I think it's a very complex question to answer, but I'll try my best to give it some form of a structure. So, long or many years ago, I did a workshop with Stanford D School, which is their design school, and they came up with a structure about defining the problem statement, ideating with the users, prototyping it quickly, and testing it out with the sample size before you take it to the larger audience. And this was focused a lot more from a product point of view and how to solve a problem, how to build a product, or how to and a lot more social problems per se. But what I liked about it is the application of it when I started using it in human resources people initiatives. And I think that's where I started seeing, or rather experiencing aha moments. So quickly, it talks about empathizing and understanding. And my recommendation to all the listeners would be, please look at it from a product point of view, because the way the products are built, the apps are built very similarly. I'm a strong believer that even human resources experiences can also be built in the same way. So define the problem. What are you solving for? If it's about expense module, if it's about cumbersome process, probably define the problem from a user point of view. Quickly ideate and be inclusive, I would say. Include the users who are facing this problem. Ideate with them as to what would be the ideal solution for this. Prototype it. So you need to maybe change a workflow. You need to maybe automate something. You probably need to rework on the process part of it, policy part of it, and so on. And then test it out. Maybe you just open up this particular expense module to a particular team, and that team experiences it in a particular way, provides feedback. Now, my only ask, because we spoke about agile practices some time ago, would be keep it agile. So keep it circular. So it's all about defining, ideating, prototyping, testing, again defining it, and so on and so forth. And that will make sure that your process, your policy, or your product means any tool that you're building will be a very forward-looking and will stand the test of time. So personally, I'm a big fan of this method. And I would also urge others who are listening to this podcast to kind of try this approach out.
Great, Saurabh. I'm very intrigued by the human-centric approach you just described, from a design thinking perspective. So let's now navigate towards the frontier of emerging technologies, building on this discussion. And I'm talking about generative AI here. So from your vantage point, what potential challenges or ethical considerations should HR leaders be aware of while they go about implementing generative AI?
Pulkit, the most important thing that we need to understand at this point in time is generative AI is generating something, and generating on the basis of two things. One is existing or pre-available knowledge or some form of a knowledge base, and second is it's learning on its own based on the responses and so on and so forth. Now, if you look at it, the people who are behind this are human beings. Yeah. And unfortunately, every human being has their own biases. There's a research which says no one is spared. Everyone is hardwired to have their own biases in some shape or the other. So unfortunately, generative AI is equally likely to have its own biases. So long we probably take care of these biases through some other means of filtering it out, I think, it's a great tool out there. A lot of these mundane or repetitive tasks can be kind of outsourced or probably passed on to the generative AI tools. So I definitely think it has a great value, and I see it getting implemented in the future. The only caution that we need to have is if the tool is biased. And a simple example of this is if you're fully dependent on the recommendation of the tool for your next leader, given that we follow 9-box principle for succession planning, and the tool is suggesting it without the context, a lot of times you will end up probably having only an objective data-oriented decision making, and the context is lost in this whole process. So I just fear that the total dependency on generative AI might not really work from a HR point of view. A combination of that or supplementing it, complementing it might genuinely work for us in the future as well.
Great perspective there, Saurabh. Thank you for that. Let's now talk about automation. Now that we have talked about generative AI, and this has been sort of been a pain point and a headache for most CHROs. And I'm talking about measuring the impact of automation. So if I were to be specific, how would you measure the impact of automation on employee engagement and organizational culture?
So let's put it this way. Automation means using of some form of a tool or a process which is automated, meaning there is no human intervention. So if that is the case, let's talk about from an employee engagement point of view.
Yeah.
talent management point of view, and let's say anything which is, say, an onboarding or an offboarding point of view.
Sure.
So if you probably look at engagement, then you could probably use it as a survey questions to understand where does an employee stand. And there are tools which gauge the moodometer, as I call it, the mood of the employee and so on, and provides the right insights from a consistency point of view, early flags point of view, and so on. If you look at it from an onboarding point of view, at this point in time, onboarding and offboarding, it's probably going to automate the document collection process, or during the exit, it's all about the deactivation process and so on and so forth. And or maybe even the exit surveys can be kind of automated through that. So again, it's a way I see data can be collected through this. The third is talent management, which is mostly all your one-on-ones, performance management, and so on and so forth. So if everything probably is on some form of a tool, my metric to choose it would be the ease of using the tool. And most important of all, the confidence in the whole process of automation. So maybe I would probably ask questions after the entire process is complete, that how easy did you find to use the tool, or so on and so forth, and what's your confidence on a scale of, say, 1 to 5, what's your confidence in the process on a scale of, say, 1 to 5. Something of that sort probably would give us a good measure of whether the time and effort invested in automating a process, was it useful or not.
Great thoughts there, Saurabh, and I totally concur with you. Even if I were to speak about how at HR1 we have been looking at automation, we spend a lot of time in making sure that each and everything that we do as it relates to building the product has to be ultra simple. And we take immense pride in positioning ourselves as the simplest HR, MS, or HCM platform, which enables, at the end of the day, it enables better adoption. Of course, that's where the impact comes from. So totally with you on that. Further double downing on this aspect of automation impact. So how do you measure the ROI of automation initiatives in HR?
It's always complex to answer that question, but I'll try and take a stab at it, because there are tangible and intangible return on investments. The tangibility, probably, I'm an old school, so I prefer total quality management, which is a Japanese principles on cost, quality, and time. So if any form of an automation reduces the cost and time, and increases the quality of the outcome, I would probably say that's a great return on investment as such. The intangible ones are a little bit hard to track, but imagine that employees are satisfied, happy, they feel that their solutions or queries are quickly answered. So from that point, I think it's slightly difficult to track, but it's also important. So maybe it's a combination of both, in terms of tangible and intangible metrics to define a return on investment.
Great, thank you, thanks, Saurabh. Now I'm at the end of this conversation, and I would love to know any piece of literature, book, or any documentary, or anything under the sun that has shaped your leadership journey.
There are many, and I think I would probably say that in my leadership journey, there have been different literature or books which have kind of helped me to move up, scale up, and so on and so forth. But I think if you allow me, I'm going to talk about at least 3 books that come to my mind. The number one is What Got You Here Will Not Get You There. The second one, which is all about increasing your emotional intelligence, it's No Hard Feelings by Liz Foslian. And something which I'm impressed and I'm currently reading, it's about Amp It Up by Slootman. So these are 3 books that have made a significant impact on my leadership style.
Thank you, Saurabh. Those are I've not heard much about these books, and I loved your choice of books here, because I'm very sure that that's what's going to bring in that extra edge, because if everyone is reading the same set of books, then everyone would have the same learning. I made a note of these books. I'm myself a book. Sort of big thank you for being on the CHRO Mindset podcast. Your thoughts and wisdom made our episode super awesome. Really appreciate you sharing your experience, your learnings with all of us and the listeners. It means a lot to us. Thanks once again.
Thank you, Pulkit. I'm very happy to be part of this community, and thank you so much for this opportunity to talk on an exciting topics like these. Thank you.
Great, Saurabh. Looking forward to engaging with you on more such activities. Dear listeners, a huge thank you for tuning in to this episode of the CHRO Mindset podcast. We hope you enjoyed the insights and wisdom shared by Saurabh. Your support means the world to us. Stay tuned for more engaging conversations, and thank you for being a part of our community.
Thanks for listening to the CHRO Mindset podcast. Don't forget to hit subscribe and leave us a review. Join us next week for another insightful conversation with a top HR leader. And if you have any questions or feedback, reach out to us on social media or via email. Thanks again for tuning in. See you next week.